Okay. So you're watching The Big Story, and thank you for staying with us. You're talking about that threat by HELB to publish the names and pictures of individuals who have defaulted on their loans. And it has caused quite an outcry and a lot of sentiment, specifically on social media, with Kenyans who are graduates who still do not have jobs, and they're saying, we cannot pay this loan. We have no way of paying this loan. And perhaps if we do not get our jobs, we will never be able to pay for this. So let's speak to Mutula Kilonzo Jr., who's the Makueni senator. He's a lawyer as well, and that's the line that I want to take with him, because I want to pick his legal mind. Thank you, sir, for joining us, for speaking to us on The Big Story. So let me get your quick reaction on that threat by HELB to publish both the names and pictures of loan defaulters.
First, it appears as if HELB has completely abdicated its responsibility under the Act, because the whole legal framework of Higher Education Loans Board contemplates a situation where all of them have options. Means that the option of even pursuing defaulters appears to be the last resort that they should take up in the event they are defaulters. The law also contemplates that, in fact, they should check whether somebody got employment. The law also contemplates a situation where, if in circumstances they find that it is impossible or difficult due to the expenses of recovering these loans, they cannot recover them, they waive them, or consideration of hardship or equity. At what point, as the board examined to determine, out of the people who have defaulted, how many of them have been undergoing hardship, how many of them are not employed, how many have deliberately refused to pay, and therefore resulted into a situation now where they want to embarrass them and put them in the newspapers, because the law and the act for which they govern them does not contemplate such a situation.
Do I still have you on the line? Do we have Mutula Kilonzo Jr. on the line?
Hello.
So I was trying to wonder if you can hear me, because I'm trying to speak to you and you're not, I wasn't able to hear you. But, so you're saying basically the important bit that the board should have done is establish the situation in which these individuals are. Are they employed? What kind of scenario are they in? But then that threat by HELB has legal implications, because guys are saying, signing for this, there was no way someone told me that if I don't pay for this, my name and my picture will be in the local daily. So there will be legal implications for HELB.
Yes, it is in fact true, because the Act does not contemplate. In fact, there's no provision in the Act that requires a person to show ability to pay, except acceptance that they have a loan and they will pay. And in the case of the Act itself, it gives them a limit of a year within which a person is supposed to start paying. So it means, in simple terms, HELB must go case-to-case basis of every person who they have given a loan. And therefore, you can't lump people together, put them in the newspaper, put their names there, and you have not established the circumstances under which these people have defaulted. It's just wrong. Because it is contemplated in this law that you give to a person who is deserving. So the principle at the first instance is that this person is unable to pay their university fees or university tuition or upkeep, and therefore you give them money. So the admission is that this person comes from a background where they are unable to pay, and therefore their ability to pay is pegged upon employment. That is what this law contemplates. So the offense under the Act is an employer who has been given the status of their employee who owes HELB money, refuses to remit to HELB. That is how this law is structured. I'm therefore at pains to understand the basis upon which you lump people together, put them in a newspaper or whatever form of advert they want to put, and say, I'm going to come for you, you have not paid, yet you have not done the simplest thing, due diligence. In fact, I'm waiting for the board to waive some of the loans as contemplated under this Act, because there are people who, strictly speaking, because they have never seen a job, teachers who have not been employed. Recently, teachers who are being recruited. They are recruiting teachers who graduated in 2013. What is supposed to happen to the person who graduated in 2016? It's appalling.
And I know that they're supposed to pay this within a year.
Yes.
And is that why you're saying even if this thing goes probably to the legal system, it's time barred, isn't it, for many of these cases?
In fact, the Act, the amendments to the law contemplates a situation where they can even recover these loans without necessarily the action being time barred. It's actually also contemplated. Means the law has opened as many avenues as possible for HELB to recover the money they have loaned to the people who they have given money to.
Okay. So there are several options, but publishing the names and the pictures of these individuals is clearly not one of them from where you sit.
Therefore, any person whose name is published in the newspaper without them exhausting the framework that is this act is in itself a violation of their privacy. They can sue them, they can take action against them, and they must be aware.
Okay. I seem to have lost Mutula, but thank you so much, Mutula Kilonzo Jr., who is Senator Makueni. Is he still there?
Yes, I'm online.
Okay, go on, Mutula, sorry.
I was saying that before HELB takes the action it has taken, and if it intends to take that action, it will be incumbent upon them to show that they have exhausted the processes that I have mentioned to you that are in the Acts. That you are employed and you refuse to, or your employer refused to remit, or they send to the employer and the employer refused to remit to them, or you didn't disclose your address, or you have willingly refused to pay.
Okay. I hear you. Thank you so much, Mutula Kilonzo Jr., Senator Makueni, and a lawyer as well, for speaking to us on The Big Story. I still have Jonathan Messiah, who's an education researcher. Sir, thank you for staying with me. I was having this conversation earlier on in the day with you, and you said, from where you sit, looking at the mandate of HELB, HELB as a board has failed in how it has carried out its operation. There should be a better way of doing this.
Yes. Higher Education Loans Board, and as the good senator has indicated, has options on how it needs to relate with the people it advances this money to. And as it is going after the individual in a manner that demeans them, does not resolve the problem. What HELB needs to do is to get its management and senior leadership out of the comfort zone so that they begin to think about new financing approaches for higher education, partnerships that then make meaning for the young scholars, so that it is not an embarrassment to have received higher education through a loan. I know of many cases where I come from, and even some of my family members, people receive this money and they just don't use it for education alone. Yeah. There are people who take this money and they literally use it to sustain the whole family. There are people who take this money and they use it for medication. There are people who get this money and, because of the tough times, divert this money to doing something else. So HELB just needs to think through and find a way in which those who can pay, those who they can identify that are in dire straits and need support, need not be embarrassed because their education was paid for through money from the exchequer.
Yeah, and that's what the Senator Mutula Kilonzo was saying. I mean, first establish the facts. Are these people able to pay? Are they in a position to pay before you start threatening people that you're going to put their names and their pictures on Local Daily? But while you speak of embarrassment, and there's something you said that resonate with, that there are people who get this money and they don't use it specifically for school fees. They take care of other people. I remember I used to have a friend, she's called Sarah. So Sarah was an orphan and she had her siblings, and she would use this money to cater for the siblings. So maybe those are some of the circumstances they need to think about. But the other thing I want to talk about, Resaya, is you've talked about embarrassment. There's another aspect that a lot of graduates are talking about, the issue of punishment, because they're saying, if I don't pay this loan, there's a penalty in it. There's 5,000 shillings per month. So if you don't pay for a year, so that is 5,000 times 12.
It is punitive, you know, the spirit, and that is where I fault the management of the Higher Education Loans Board. The spirit behind the establishment of the Higher Education Loans Board was to give university and college students a cushion. So this cushion cannot be extended for a period of 4 to 6 years when you are in college, and then when you get out, it turns into punishment. That 5,000 shillings a month as penalty is not even what commercial banks are charging. So it is absurd that that penalty is even there. The idea is that this is somebody who could not finance their higher education. So why are we punishing the poor by increasing penalties on the things that look like they're likely going to push them from operating below the poverty line into some form of comfort zone? Why not say that you received 100,000 shillings when you were at the university through HELB, pay back your 100,000 shillings? For a very long time, I sit on a board of management for secondary school, and we were, as a senator mentioned, we were employing, in September this year, we were employing people who graduated in 2011, 2012. That is when they are getting their first salary. Now, look at it. If you want to know that there is confusion in the education sector, Linda, look at it that in October, we were employing graduates as interns.
We are going to 10,000 shillings.
Yes. So such people, the people who are sitting at HELB are going to start running after them after 1 year. So a penalty of 5,000 shillings starts applying. What are you doing to that young person? It's literally just pushing them into depression, because when ends cannot meet and your back is on the wall, where do you turn to? So we cannot resolve political problems using education, and education is becoming a soft target. So people who need to fix the economy don't fix it, then we blame education by saying that graduates from the system are half-baked, or graduates from the system are not working hard enough, when all odds are against them and no support system is available, and HELB that looked like was a ray of hope for the poor slaps them with penalties left, right, and center.
Because the conversation then gets to the point that education is now a punishment, especially for students who come from poor families, because then you subjected them to a scenario where you will graduate. From the minute you graduate, you start paying that penalty. The minute you get a job, no matter how much you pay, you get paid, you start paying for this HELB loan. So basically, it's a life of struggle from point A to point B. And I like what Babu said. Babu said, education is a right. I should be able to get education, whether I come from a rich family or a poor family. So basically, from where you sit, Resaya, as we wrap up this conversation, what is the way forward for HELB? Already established by what Kenyans are saying, publishing pictures and names is not the way to go, because these are people who got to where they are in the first place because they didn't have that money. We know that there's a problem to do with unemployment in the Republic of Kenya. What is the way forward for HELB?
I think they just need to put a little thought into what they want to do and what they anticipate to do going forward. But coming, to the fore with such weird ideas, this is not going to support the education of any child in Kenya going forward. What they need to do is to look for structured partnerships with the agencies, individuals, and discuss on how to support the poor children. And for me, it will be something that will be very helpful, that the orphans who are going through the process, by the time you apply for HELB loan when you are joining university, such children, by the time they clear university, should not be having a loan, because they came in from a point of disadvantage and they need more cushioning and more support. We should not be punishing them further.
They need to be cushioned as much as possible. And yes, I know of individuals who've gone through this.
Yes.
They struggle from year 1 to year 4 or year 6. And by the time they get out, the last thing they need is that push and the threat that we are now seeing. Wesaya, so to speak, HELB has really changed the lives of so many Kenyans out here. And like you say, there are very many students who are coming from disadvantaged positions. And they're saying we need this money so that we can be able to support the rest of the guys who are coming up to be able to pay their loans. So it's a noble idea, don't you think? It's a noble idea, but the whole way in which they're going through it is wrong.
Yeah, it is the approach. The intent, if you look at the spirit of the act and how it was crafted, it was actually forward-looking and with a lot of compassion in the way the law, the Higher Education Loans Board Act was written. Now, we cannot throw away that spirit by introducing punitive measures that were not contemplated within the law. So the line that the management of Higher Education Loans Board wants to take is a line that is going to derail the sector. It will not add any value. So it will be my honest request that they drop that approach, but then as they drop it, they look at cushioning people. It is, you know, in the developed world, in Europe, in America, people receive support for their education, but it is they are not punished for being poor. So here, I cannot contemplate what went through the leadership of HELB for them to even think about doing that. And I say this because my father passed on when I was in Form 3, and I managed to survive through secondary school, and I went to university. But then, unfortunately, when I was in 3rd year, I was involved with a nearly horrific road accident. I spent half a year in Kenyatta, and I used part of my HELB loan to pay for my medical bills and get well. So if it were such a situation that after a year they start slapping me with penalties, then I will just raise my hand in the air and declare myself bankrupt.
So have you paid for your loan?
I'm paying, I've not finished.
Okay, I hear you. Invisible Challenges on Twitter says, for those who may not know, most likely the 85,000 defaulters are unemployed sufferers and their details are not with KRA or any employer. HELB has partnered with every single employer, including Mama Mboga down here, said that no one can ordinarily default on paying. Jotham Munala says, I'm not a HELB beneficiary. However, I support that government should sponsor the citizens and graduates 100%. Babu is a true comrade. Big up Mweshimiwa. Bob Francis says, I second, we can appropriate the funds in Parliament and write off these debts. And I've seen a good number of people actually having this conversation. The president at some point wrote off a good number of loans. Then perhaps he should do this as well with the HELB loans, because these are mostly people with zero employment. And that is why we leave our conversation this evening on The Big Story. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this conversation, especially for those of you on social media. Big thank you to Babu Owino, Member of Parliament Embakasi, who spoke to Sophia Wanuna, Mutula Kilonzo, Junior Senator Makueni, and of course, Jonathan Wesaya as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this evening. I'm Linda Ogutu.